May is Mental Health Awareness Month. As women, it is important to focus on our mental health. This space today is dedicated to exploring the complexities of the mind and the unique challenges women face in their mental health journeys. Let's embark on this journey of healing and growth together. Hello and welcome. You're listening to Life with Libby Joy, a podcast to explore the journey of womanhood, our challenges, our successes, and experiences. It is my hope that you will be informed and inspired through our conversations and stories shared by women who are navigating this journey called life. I am your host, Libby Joy, and we are going to enjoy the journey of life together. Today, our main thing is mental health awareness. We are going to talk about women and mental health, and I have today a very special guest who knows all things about mental health and mental health awareness. I would like to introduce Dr. Mirriam Knight. She's and she is many things, and I am going to read her bio because I really want you to hear all the great things. She is a clinical psychologist, a transformational coach, a founder of She Is Unleashed and Destiny Connections, LLC. She also serves as the co-pastor of Liberation Church, Cleveland, alongside her husband, Benjamin Wilson, with a global background in education, ministry, and international development. She now specializes in helping high-performing, faith-driven women heal from burnout. There's a lot of people burned out, rediscover purpose, and lead with clarity and confidence. As a speaker, author, and spiritual mentor, Dr. Knight brings a powerful blend of clinical expertise and prophetic insight to every space she enters. She is also a wife, adoptive mom of 2, and a passionate advocate for healing, wholeness, and kingdom alignment in leadership and life. And again, I would just like to say welcome, Dr. Knight. It's so good to see you. I will also say I consider her a very wonderful person, and I'm beginning to be her friend, hopefully. I mentioned I'd like to be her client, but right now we're just going to go with friends. Just please welcome Dr. Knight. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me. It is an honor and a privilege to be in this space with you.
No, thank you so much. I want to just jump right in because May, we're celebrating mental health awareness, and I think it's so important that there is a focus time, I believe, every month. Of course, we should be talking about mental health and wellness, but we have just specifically started making that our mental health awareness month. And so because of that, I thought it would be just a great idea to invite someone in who that is like truly your gift and your passion, and you understand, not only have you been to school for this, but you also really flow with this in your ministry to women and to others. And so I'm glad you're here today because I want to really just pick your brain some about mental health. Hear people mention, you need to take your respite, you need to do your self-care, which is all wonderful. But can you just tell us a little bit about some of the top issues that women face with mental illness? I know there's a lot, but just a few of the ones that you see most prevalent in your practice.
Absolutely. So I specifically work or have been called to in this season serve high achievers, which is most women that are serving in multiple roles in their lives, whether it's in the education field, whether it's in the field of politics, business, medical fields, therapy fields, and amongst these specific women, and also serve in ministry in different areas of life, mom, wife, just multiple roles. And so identified three main things that I've identified amongst all of them is one, emotional exhaustion.
Mm.
They're mentally and emotionally exhausted in multiple ways, but they don't feel like they have the option to take a minute and pause. And this is often masked in a way as excellence, which in some ways is also perfectionism, because this feeling that they need to be everything to everyone all the time. And not just all that, they've got to do it perfectly. The second one is a buzzword that we've been hearing a lot of over the last several years is imposter syndrome. Is even though they are high performing, high achieving women, they are serving with this underlying feeling of not feeling like they belong, not feeling like they're worthy, waiting for the moment where someone's going to call them out as a fraud or tell them that they shouldn't be in that place, despite how hard they've worked to be in that position. And thirdly, that behind the scenes, there's so much unprocessed grief and trauma that they don't feel like they can share with anybody. So it's a lot of hidden grief, a hidden trauma. And because a lot of people call them the strong woman, they're the woman that everyone goes to, they're the woman that everyone depends on. But in a lot of seasons, in a lot of ways, they're the ones that don't have anyone they can go to. They don't feel like they can share their grief and their pain and their trauma and their suffering. So they're living a lot of what I call, or what psychology calls, fragmented lives. The lives are very compartmentalized and nobody really fully knows them, because they only know different segments of who they are. So these are the three main things that I've found in the specific group of women that I've been serving in this season.
Okay. I think we could have a whole year talking about just those three things that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. Let's talk about this exhaustion part, because I know not only do, women of all space and time have exhaustion or exhaustive moments. I know recently I've been doing a whole thing on motherhood and women who are mothers, not only just of adult children but of little children, also have the exhaustive piece. And when you say that, think it comes to my mind, just speaking to women, that we feel like that's a norm,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's normal to be exhausted because I have all these things I have to do. It's normal. So why or how would we know when we are exhausted in a different way than what would be normal? Or what you're making it sound different than I'm just tired. I need to go to sleep, or I need a little rest, or my child was up until 2 in the morning last night. What is difference between that concept and what you're mentioning about exhaustion? How do you see that as different?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of phrases that I've heard often are the words I'm tired, but it's not just I'm tired, it's I'm really, really tired. I
Mm.
don't know how much more of this I can do. I feel like I'm at the breaking point, and at the same time, I feel like I can't stop. That if I stop, the world's going to fall apart. If I stop, no one's going to pick up the slack. That if I stop, basically not feeling like you have the permission to pause and rest and have a moment to yourself. And then there's also, I'm exhausted, I'm carrying so much mentally, emotionally, so much that I have not processed of my own.
Mm.
Whether it's betrayal, whether it is losses and grief of your own, and it's weighing on you, but you really don't feel like you have the time to process that. And there's this book called The Body Keeps Score, and it
Yeah.
says basically that if you don't process stuff, your body remembers, and eventually your body's going to start speaking for you. And so we start seeing our immune system breaking down, we start getting headaches, gastrointestinal issues, we start feeling dizzy, but we push through that because we're women, and that's what we're expected to do. There's a lady called Tricia, I forget what her last name is. Her book is called Rest is Resistance, and she talks about how the mindset of slavery has so occupied us when people were pushed to move and function even when they were impaired and even when they were wounded, even when that same mentality women carry so heavily, that even when we're in pain and we're almost at death's door, we still keep pushing because that's what we're supposed to do. So it's a tiredness, weariness to the sole of our feet and our bones,
Mm.
but we don't feel like we have permission to stop. We're afraid to stop.
I'm glad you clarified that, and I've actually felt that before. When you mentioned that not only is it you're tired, but the weight you're carrying from others and the weight you have inside of you both of those weights, and it's just like I'm going through the motions. I'm moving, but I'm not moving.
Mhm.
I'm doing the things, but these things are really taxing my spirit. And that, how do we get out of that? What do we do when we're faced with that kind of tiredness? I'm gonna start there because the other two things I want to talk about too. But what are some things? Just, I know you're going to see a mental health professional. I'm advocate for that. But what are
Mhm.
some other just tips that you can just maybe just give us some nuggets to some things that you would suggest?
One of the things I start out with is creating safe spaces for women to feel like they can put off their cape, where
Mm,
they feel that they can. So one of the things I've heard, or maybe which God has granted me the grace to put into words for women, because I've experienced it myself, has been the fear of, if I stop and if I allow myself to fall apart, I don't know that there is anyone who has the capacity to be a safe container for me, to hold space for me, to let me fall apart and then help me put the pieces back together. Because a lot of times we've had spaces where we have allowed our cape to fall off and been vulnerable, but our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses have been used against us, and we've been stabbed in the back and we've been wounded even more. So the one thing that I often start out with is, I'm here to hold a container for you. I'm here to have a safe space for you because I know what it feels like to not have that place where you can fall apart. There's no judgment here. You can be as broken as you need to be. That's not going to take away from how competent and how much of it's not going to take away from who you are in other spheres of your life. This is a space where you get to be raw and real. So I would say the first thing is you've got to give yourself, and use the word radical, permission to rest, and to not just to rest, but to feel, because sometimes we're running away from rest and the pause because we're afraid that if we pause and we rest, we'll have to actually deal with the things we've been avoiding dealing with for the longest time.
I love that safe container, a space. It's good to know that there is a safe space, that there are others that can take on those things that we think no one can do, no one can take on. My daughter, the other day, was talking about having a village or a people around you. I think it's so important that we understand the need for that and how that has to do with our wellness and our
Mm-hmm.
wholeness to have that. So thank you so much. I really do think our listeners need to know that the things that they're feeling are not normal. And I don't want to say it like that, but they're not things that they should have to hold on to. I'll say it like that
Absolutely.
because there may be some normality to it because we have felt like that before, but that's not the way we should feel. We should be able to release things, and we should be able to have places that we can hold the things that we can't hold anymore. And so it's good to make sure you give that space to people. Otherwise, we feel like that this is how it's supposed to be, right? This is what either motherhood looks like, or this is what being an adult looks like, or
Mm-hmm.
this is what, life looks like. So thank you
Absolutely.
for that.
I think another part to that too is that we often feel like no one understands. We don't feel like, even with other women, we don't feel like, which may be a judgment on our part, but it also stems from our experiences with other relationships and other situations where we've been wounded and hurt. And so we don't feel like anyone has the capacity to really understand what we're feeling and what we're going through. And we feel like we'll be judged. And we also feel like if we let down our guard and let people see our brokenness and our pain and our hurt, that maybe they'll interpret that as we're incompetent or we can't handle it. It's not that you can't handle it. You can handle it, but you don't have to. And that part, you don't have to, I don't think a lot of us receive that well. Because then the second thing would be giving them permission to set boundaries, giving us permission. Because I'm in that circle too, giving us permission to set boundaries and not see that as punishment or something that is mean. Because when we say no, a lot of times we feel guilty about saying no when people need us and want something from us. And as faith driven women as well, we don't feel like we have permission to say no to people and to set boundaries because we're supposed to love people. But saying no and setting boundaries is an act of love.
So that part, that it's okay not to deal with it, and that our permission you just gave us as well is that we have the permission to have boundaries. And that
Mm-hmm.
part of boundaries is a part of love. And I think that is so important because we feel like when we have to step away or we have to say no. I was at a conference and they said no, is a full sentence. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to explain your no.
Mm-hmm.
But they also mentioned that you should own your no. And that when you say no, there's a reason behind it. You don't have to always explain it to people, but you have a reason why you say no. And I think it's so important. I was telling someone that invisible sicknesses, in which is what I have, it's invisible. So no one can tell that I have any illness situations or anything. But when I know my body is not able or capable to do something at that moment, I have to say no. And for a moment, people did look at me funny, like, why are you not at this event? As a pastor's wife, and, as a woman of faith, I'm usually at all the things that we do. And I had to realize for my own physical and mental and emotional health, no had to be an answer I started giving people. And again, is not because I don't love you. It's because I love me. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that because I'm trying to be the best for me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And the light came on.
and the light came on. My background is brighter. Now you can see me. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you. So, yeah,
Let me
so
add
go ahead.
something to that real quick, too.
Sure.
That's really powerful what you just shared, going to all the things. I think one of the things that started freeing me from that, too, was this. Jesus didn't say yes to everything either. He went where the Father sent him. And I think sometimes that may be because, so it also addresses this issue of people pleasing in
Mm.
terms of, can we shift our focus to God? I want to please you and you alone. So I will only go where you tell me to go and nowhere else. So is this in line with the assignment of my day from Him and not from anybody else? And if he didn't say yes, I mean, Jesus didn't go when they called him as a family. Jesus didn't go when they called him as friends unless the Father said go. And yes, that made some people mad at him. So we've also got to get comfortable and okay with people being mad at us.
Yeah. I'm starting to get that. I read the book Let Them, and I've just been saying it so much because it really did free my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people will be mad at you when you say no. And unfortunately, that's what happens. But like you said, even Jesus didn't do all the things that he actually could have,
Mm-hmm.
but he even did what he was supposed to do and not just what he could do. And
Yes.
that is really good, especially for women. Like, we can do lots of things. I mean, we can do almost, I mean, they say I can, you can go out, you can make the what they say, you can make bacon, you can go pick it up, make it, you can clean the house, you can do all the things you can do. But at some point, sometimes you just have to learn no, and this, or not right now, or maybe that's a tomorrow thing, or this
Mm-hmm.
is one season of my life I did that. I'm in a new season of my life.
Yeah.
And the season changes, I think it's also very helpful for women. I do want to get back to, like I said, I could be here with you all day. This is so helpful to me, and I know it's going to be helpful to the listeners. You mentioned the imposter syndrome, and you're right. If we have not heard or seen so many people, every time we get something new, I have to always look it up. I keep hearing people say it. Oh, that's the imposter syndrome. And I'm just like, what is the imposter syndrome? And I did something a few episodes back about my understanding of the imposter syndrome. I gave the definition of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that in the beginnings of many things that you do, you may feel like
Mm-hmm.
you are not the expert because you haven't done it. And you may feel like an imposter at that point. But I know the imposter syndrome, the concept is even deeper than you being a novice at something. And
Mm-hmm.
so, can you just share a little bit about what it is and what it isn't? Because I think when we hear all these terminologies and beautiful words, and there's even more that my friend was telling me about, people have been saying about men lately. There's all these new words and new language that we use, but we don't always use it correctly. So, can you please tell me what that imposter syndrome really is?
So I'm going to give you a revelation of what God taught me about it. And it may sound super spiritual for other people, but it's going to make it real simple.
Okay.
So what the Lord showed me about what imposter syndrome is that it literally comes down to a lack of integrity.
Mm.
And many people won't want to hear this because we've started using imposter syndrome as a crutch. We've started using it to label a whole bunch of things. So, imposter syndrome, in essence, is the fear that you are a fraud, or this feeling and belief that you are a fraud. It's this thought and feeling that someone is going to expose you for the fraud that you are, and that you don't deserve to be in the spaces that you are in.
Mm.
And that you're waiting for this moment when someone's going to tell you you're not supposed to be here. That's simplifying it.
Mm.
God showed me that it actually, when it comes down to it, the reason you're feeling like a fraud is because maybe in a lot of ways you are a fraud. And this is what I'll add to that is a lot of times we preach and teach things that we're not practicing ourselves.
Wow.
And a lot of times, for example, and he started with me. He said, for example, like if you preach and teach rest, if you preach and teach all these things about taking care of yourself, but you're not doing it yourself, of course you're going to be afraid that someone's going to flip back the curtain and ask and see that you're a fraud and you're an imposter. Because if you are teaching other people to do things that you're not doing, there's always going to be this sense of a lack of integrity. What you're speaking and what you're living is not aligned. And then it goes back to obedience too. If I'm walking in obedience with God and I'm doing what He tells me to do, and I'm not talking about the big things, I'm talking about the small things. If I walk in alignment with God and walk in obedience with Him every single day and I'm doing what He tells me to do, I don't have to be afraid of what other people are thinking of me.
Mm.
Because all I'm doing is being obedient to Him. And it's that simple. And I know it sounds oversimplified and super spiritual, but it is literally when there's an alignment and integrity in my life. If I'm walking in integrity, and here's the other part, if I own my story and I own my imperfections and I own my failures and I own everything about me, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I tell my story, I get to set the terms and the conditions. But if I'm faking it and if I'm pretending to be somebody that I'm not, then I'm always going to live in fear of exposure. And here's the other part. When we're always looking for affirmation and approval from other people, and we're looking to be seen, and seen not for who we truly are authentically, but seen for someone that we want people to see us as, we're always going to be afraid again of what they will see. We're afraid of stepping into the light. We're afraid of exposure, period, because we want people to see us in a positive light. But if we are committed to being completely 100% authentic, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then again, we own the narrative and there's nothing to be afraid of, because I'll go ahead and tell you all my dirt up front. Let's have a real conversation. I'll tell you where I'm failing. I'll tell you what do you need to know? Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not afraid if you find out things about me, because I've already put it out there. And you can't manipulate me and you can't control me because you've got something on me. It allows me, authenticity allows me to walk in freedom because I'm not putting on.
And so that authenticity is what, when I mentioned in my concept of, I'm not great at something, but if I authentically have already claimed that I'm learning this, that this is not, my expertise in this subject, or I have never done this. You spoke, I said, I've been talking about mental health awareness and we're doing mental health right now. And I really do need to have a mental health professional. I have not had one that I've found, but I tell my friend that she is a mental health professional. I said, I don't pay you, but you've been, my little mini mental health. She said, yes, but you need an actual person. And so I'm still searching for that because I see the need for one and I'm looking for one, right? And I realized that the other day. I say it all the time, but if I'm going to be true to this and not be an imposter, I have to actually do what I'm saying I suggest other people doing, which we're going to get to in a minute, because how to find the right mental health person is been not only a question I've had, but I've had people ask me that question. Like, you've been talking about mental health professionals. I want to try it, but how do I do that? And so I said, I'm going to ask Dr. Mirriam when she comes to help us out on that. You really help with the imposter syndrome. The last thing you talked about, I believe, was it grief? Did you talk about
Unprocessed grief and trauma.
grief and trauma? And in this day and age, and I didn't want to talk about society as a whole. However, I feel like now we are exposed to so much through our social medias or just the television more than we used to even be exposed to. And so not only our personal family grief, but we're also like living the traumas and griefs of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And this definitely has an effect on us.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm a school teacher, and I just saw something I posted a year ago or 2 years ago, and it just happened to come up on my husband's feed. And it was talking about the situation, the tragedy that happened in Texas. And that conversation I had the day after, you could see the grief in me, and it wasn't any of my loved ones that died. It was not anybody I knew, but just the feelings of loss of humanity, of humans, to realize that there's trauma that happens in schools and kids and all of these things are added to even my own personal grief and trauma. So just talk a little bit about that if you can, just for a minute.
So, in psychology, we have the term vicarious trauma. There's that, which is what we carry
Mhm.
from those that we serve. From secondary trauma is what we witness in the lives of other people that we carry and we take on. And then there's our own personal trauma and our own personal griefs. And a lot of times, so I'll speak to the personal part too, is a lot of times, so for example, miscarriages, the deaths and losses of loved ones, accidents, racism, microaggressions that we experience in the workplace and even in the church. That's a whole topic for another day. But all these things, sexual assault, so much that we experience personally that others come to us and then they pour on us what they've been through, and so we're carrying that, what we witness on social media. We carry all of that, but because again we're on the go 24/7, 365, never really pausing enough to process that. We maybe give ourselves 5 seconds. Okay, go ahead and cry. Then you got to suck it up, pull on your big girl panties, and let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because life's waiting and we've got to do what we've got to do. Eventually it catches up with you. And for some of us, it shows up in migraines. For some of us, it shows up in a visit to the ER. For some of us, it's showing up in the extra physical weight that we're carrying in our bodies, which is for some of us, we may look like we're overweight, but it's actually the trauma that's embedded in our bodies that we have not processed. And if you would stop and pause for a second and actually deal with that stuff, you would literally shed the weight like that, because you've been trying, you're doing the exercises, you're doing the diets, but it's not working because what is actually embedded in your body is unprocessed grief and trauma. And so I can talk about that for a whole hour or more, but the key is we have to, it's an absolute necessity. And some of us, we don't stop until we have a stroke. Some of us, we don't stop until we have aneurysms. And even when you have those, you're like, oh, okay, just another thing on the list. And you just scrap it up. You don't take it seriously. You move on to the next thing. And then we run the risk of not ever finishing what God assigned us to do and cutting our lives short, because we're carrying so much that we haven't really paused long enough to process, because we feel like we can't.
So, of course, you're talking to me. You weren't trying to talk to me, but you did. I know all of the weight I have picked up is a lot of drama, a lot of trauma. If I was sit here to tell you about all the things that I have been going through in the last 5 years, you'd be like, oh my goodness, why have you spoken to somebody? I have a little, but I need to do it on a constant basis,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we'll go back to that question before I get to the other one. How do you find someone to talk to? I mentioned to you, your spirit aligns with mine. You are outside of the state that I live in, so you technically cannot be a therapist of mine. You can do some coaching. We talked about that. But how do you find someone? I was asked about a few things like, if I tell my therapist something about my children and how I'm feeling, can they take my children away? I've heard all kind of questions about what actually happens in therapy.
Hmm.
And it's not just African American people who have some trauma, don't care for the concept. I know that church people have, we can pray. So why am I talking to someone about that? I've already, talked to Jesus about it. I mean, we have people who are feeling like that, but there are also people who just literally cannot understand how to find a great person. There's so many lists of people, and we see it on TV. We're like, well, what do we ask? How do we know that this is the person that I can connect to? So, what would you just say for that?
So I would say there are many wonderful platforms that you can go to look for a therapist. Psychology Today is a really good one. I would put in their specifiers in terms of what gender you're looking for, what faith you're looking for, what practices you're looking for, what they specialize in. So I would say the first part, though, is first of all knowing yourself and knowing what it is that you need. And being okay with interviewing a couple of different people just as much as they're interviewing you. So most therapists have a free consultation call that you can hop on a call with them, feel out, ask your questions, ask them how they approach therapy, ask them their philosophies or their belief systems, what they are, how they operate in sessions. I've asked clients in my consultations what has worked for you in the past and what has not worked out for you in the past. So being able to answer that and say, okay, I don't like a person who's just asking me how do you feel about that, but doesn't really give me practical solutions. I've had their clients say I'm clear. I say I'm a spirit-filled faith-based therapist. It's not something I impose on my clients, but it is core to who I am. And I find that when I'm aligned in values with the person that I'm serving, I serve you better. And when we're spirit filled and you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit, I can serve you even better because then I'm free to flow and tell you what I'm sensing, not just in the physical, not just what you're telling me, but what I'm hearing behind what you're telling me. And I'm very direct and I'm very straightforward, but I'm also very careful not to create a safe space where you don't feel judged for what you're going through. Also, your experience and your background. What I bring to the table is not only am I a therapist and a coach, but I'm also a minister and I'm a pastor. So I bring in a history of what it means like to serve in ministry for decades. And I know what it means like to carry the burden of not just the secular, but also the spiritual. And so if that's what you're looking for, be very clear, like this is what I'm looking for. And I know there's a lot more people now that also have similar backgrounds, where it's not just spiritual, but it's also there's a clinical component, and being able to balance that out is really important. A lot of times we have people who have the spiritual part, but they don't have the clinical part down. Or they have the clinical part and then the spiritual just feels like it's just an add-on, but they really don't really have a relationship with the Lord. So I think it's being able to interview as many as you need to until you find a great fit. I also tell my clients this, is that once we lock in, I need you to commit to sticking with the process for at least 12 weeks, because that's what scientifically and research wise has been proven as a minimum period of when you can start to see some results if you stick with the process. So it's understanding that opening up the onion and exposing yourself to vulnerability and sharing your story is very uncomfortable. And when you are dealing with deep-seated wounds, it's kind of like going into surgery. And it can be very, very uncomfortable, and you may want to run and you may want to quit. Don't. So imagine that you are on a surgery table and you just open up this whole thing for surgery and you decide, I don't like this. This is painful. Let me get up off this surgery table and walk out of here. You're walking out exposed. You're not allowing us to close it in. So a lot of people don't allow for that process. And then you say therapy didn't work. But what it is that you never really gave yourself or the therapist or this process. It is a process. So also check what your expectations are. If you've been dealing with something for 30, 40 years or more, even if it's just 5 or 10 years, and you go into therapy with this expectation that we're going to have 1 or 2 sessions and all of a sudden all my problems are going to go away, that's an unrealistic expectation. Then you feel disappointed but you didn't really have the right expectations going into this process. And I often say to clients in the consultations, it's going to get bad before it gets worse. And so it's going to be some hard work. Are you willing to put in the hard work? And it's not the work I'm going to do. I'm here to facilitate a process with you. But what happens in between sessions, that's where the hard work happens, because you got to take what we talk about in sessions and you've actually got to apply it to your life. That's hard work. And many of us, especially Christians, we don't like the hard work. We want someone to lay hands on us and get better in a second because that's what we've been taught. It's not happen that way. Transformation is a process.
Okay. So I don't know about anybody who's listening, but for me, I heard her say that I have to interview people. It may take some time to find the person. And then once I find that person, I have to lock in for at least 12 weeks, if not more. And that it can get, what you said, worse before it gets worse.
It gets bad
Bad
before
before
it
it
gets
gets
good.
worse. Right. In other words, that when you go in and you actually have to dig a little bit about what's going on, it's going to be, sometimes there will be some pain that erupts. Now, one thing I will mention, just the thoughts that I know, is that even though there is some pain to dig at some things, but once you are released and you are healed through the power of conversation and the techniques, there's a freedom that goes there. And I think that's the part that I want to just encourage people, is that when you dig in, just remind yourself that you're in the process of being freed from whatever it is that you're bondage that you're underneath. And it does take a moment to get free from bondage. And so that is so important that you've given some tips about that, because the interviewing people is something I think, like even doctors. Sometimes we don't even interview our doctors. Like we find a doctor that's on our plan and we go to them, and I hear so many people saying, "Oh, I can't stand my doctor." I don't know why we go to people we don't like, and then we say, "Oh, I can't stand them. They never do this or they never do that." But we don't feel like we should change because that's the doctor that was on our plan. And truth be told, you can change your doctor to get a doctor that best aligns with what you're in need of, so you can feel comfortable when you go into your sessions. And the same thing with your medical professionals. And I do appreciate that. So I'm going to declare, and because I'm saying it live on tape, that I will find someone within the next, I will say, month, because I will get to me making transitions in a minute, but I will find somebody to speak to, because I have some things I really need to share. I think we all do. And that doesn't negate my Christian faith. I am full of joy. I'm a joy person. My name is Libby Joy. I believe in joy. But even in joy, there are things that are going on that you just need to process.
Yes.
And that doesn't make you any less of a woman or of a Christian or of a person as a person. It just makes you a mindful person. It makes you an aware, emotionally intelligent person to realize that you need just to talk to somebody other than the people in your family. You need to talk to someone that has a perspective that's outside, that can just kind of help you walk through, as you said, the journey and the healing. And so we're going to encourage that again in this Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm going to say it one more time for me and everyone else. We need to really take time for our emotional health. And I have my Prioritize Your Spiritual Health shirt on. This is my brand, or my company, my concept that, your spiritual health is 100% important. And I'm not just talking about, prayers, which are great, but we really need to focus and concentrate and center ourselves. And we need to make sure we realize that we are whole people. And so everything is a part of that. And so I'm tapping into that. And I will get to someone to talk about physical at another time, because I'm tapping into that as well. I understand all those journeys are important for us to
Yes.
be well, right? And that's
Yes.
the whole goal, for us to have wellness.
Yes.
You mentioned in another show you were on, something about we have permission, and you gave us permission to be, I think it was whole or well. I believe that you gave permission. You said we are supposed to be whole and we're supposed to be well. And I said that is something I think we all need to remind ourselves. We are supposed to be healthy, whole, well individuals and human beings. And that's why the Mental Health Awareness Month is so important, because all of those things make you a whole person.
Amen.
I have so many questions about things. You've already mentioned some great tips, I want to talk just briefly about your journey in motherhood. You don't have to share all of it, but I know you're a mom, and I'm excited for you. And do you want to just share a little bit about motherhood and mental health?
Ooh,
Can you be a healthy mother? I say that because
ooh.
you have younger children, and so
Hmm.
you're at a different stage, and I am at this present. I'm in a different stage. I'm in a very happy stage, but yet it's still a challenge.
Hmm.
How would you just want to just say anything about motherhood and mental health?
I say this often, motherhood is the greatest refining fire that the Lord has ever created because it has. We recently became adoptive parents of two children. They are a sibling set, and motherhood has stretched me in more ways than I thought possible, in every way possible. It has forced me to confront myself, it has forced me to confront my own grief, my own desires, forced me to confront my own feelings of insecurity and inadequacy in so many ways. It has forced me to face my own rotten fruit, if I can use that word, when it comes to the fruit of the Spirit, and it has forced me to check myself and grow in so many ways and to truly, truly lean on the Holy Spirit in ways I have never had to lean on the Holy Spirit. I don't know what I'm doing. Some people would say, you should know, you just specialized in this, you trained in this, you should know. I'm like, it does not translate. Head knowledge and practical life knowledge are two completely different things. But it has also been in that process of learning to go to God raw and real. It has also been a journey of healing my own journey with my own mother, healing my own journey as a child. There's so many things that I had to confront, unresolved things, so that I can learn how to make room to be loving and kind and generous. I'm not anywhere near where I need to be. And it's a continuous, Lord, help me to, you chose me to be these kids. I don't know why most of the time. But God's grace is sufficient even in our imperfections. So, and then it also forces me to realize I need to be well if I'm going to, because we can again only multiply that which we are. So, being very intentional about making room to be, first of all, there for myself so that I can be there for them has been a great teacher in so many ways. I can't pour into them if I have nothing left to give. And I can't do it alone. So I'm learning to lean into community and to lean into our families and our friends. And above all, God, my husband is a great dad. I question whether I'm a great mom a lot of the time. um, and I'm not. I'm learning how to be a mom because this is a very new and very raw journey for me. And I don't think it's something you can master and perfect. I think it's something that we are constantly having to learn from God. How do I mother? And it's not the same. Each one is so different. So there's not a one size fits all. You can read all the books in the world, and that's important to read so you can see other people's experiences and feel like you're not alone and you're not insane. But you've also got to trust the discernment of the Holy Spirit as to what do I need to apply where and when. So that's just a small synopsis of my motherhood journey. It's a constant growing journey for me.
Thank you. What are the ages of your children?
10.
You're in the thick of it. Well, let me just encourage you as one mom to another. Um, yeah, no, you're right. You are probably not the perfect mother because there is actually no such thing as the
Mm-hmm.
perfect mother. But I'm learning that you being a loving mother or love your children is the best kind of mother you can be. And so when you make mistakes, I learned one time that you have to apologize even to your children. Like if you do something, you're like, oh, that wasn't good. You can go back and say, you know what, mommy had a hard day and I may have, been too, whatever. And you can apologize to your kids. But ultimately, really, the loving part is there and the growing part. And that's why people tell me that I don't have them yet, that grandchildren are the greatest. Because after you've gone through these motherhood years and you've learned that, when your children start having children and you have these little people, you're used to the little people by then, and you have a different kind of grace and love that you didn't even have with your children. And so I think it's important as you continue this motherhood journey. Again, Like you just told us, you're not alone. And I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job because you are one day at a time loving on your children and trying to figure it out the best for them. And so that's the best kind of mother to be. And it tells even those that are listening, even, at all stages of our life, we have to struggle with some things that we don't understand and are not experts in because we are learning, right? That's a journey called life. And so as she's learning her motherhood journey and I'm learning my motherhood journey for adult children. They're all different stages of journeys, but they are journeys and we are all learning. And so give yourself grace. Give yourself grace that you are learning to love even more and harder. And I think that is the best kind of mom to be. One that knows that they don't know all the things that they have to learn. That's the best kind of person, actually, really. When people know it all, they just don't know too much. And that's what really, right? That's what it is. When you think you know it all, you don't know too much because it is all a growth process. But thank you for sharing. Even your motherhood journey made it look different than my motherhood journey did, or someone else's. It's good to know there are different types of journeys in our growth in our motherhood. So I'm excited for you. I'm truly excited, and you are feel free anytime to call me, and you can just sit there and vent, and I would be okay with that. Right? You need that.
I
You
appreciate
may not
that.
need a mental health therapist. You just need someone to say, you know what happened today? And I can say, girl, I understand. That's happened to me before. And guess what? They grow out of that stage. Hallelujah. That's the good part. They grow out of that stage. I was talking to my daughter about the silent years, and you haven't quite gotten there yet. They grow out of that stage. It's a blessing.
Oh,
Well,
Lord.
I am going to, we've been on here for a moment. I've just so much to say, and thank you so much for coming today. I want to just share. I know you have lots of different events and things that you can share, but I know you just dropped your latest book and it's available. So can you share just a little bit about that and then how people can find you um, for us? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, the book that I dropped this weekend is called The Illusion of Intimacy
Mm.
When Connection Isn't Covenant. And it speaks to relational healing, not just romantic relationships, but all relationships. I've had several conversations over the last several years with just different people that have been wounded in relationships and wounded in especially in relationships with other females, if I speak specifically to the woman. And it speaks to how we can realign ourselves and recognize that a lot of times we get into these relationships because we're looking for connection, we're looking for intimacy, we're looking for someone who gets us. And a lot of times those connections may not be God ordained. And so we leave those spaces hurt and wounded, and that prevents us from actually forming the ones that God ordains for us because we've been so wounded by other people, and there's so many walls that we've built up that prevent us from stepping into the Mary and the Elizabeth kind of relationships that we do need in our lives that will help us push forth the destinies and the assignments that God has placed in our lives because we connected with the wrong ones. And a lot of times those stem from especially relationships with people that we thought would mother and nurture us because there were some mother wounds and there were some inner wounds that we never healed, but we're looking for our pastors, we're looking for our pastor's wife to mother us, but that's not their assignment, and we're looking for them to be our besties and our friends, and that's not their assignment. There's these relationships that we misposition in our lives, and because we never ask the Lord, God, do you want me to be in relationship with this person?
Mm.
And because we never involve God in the process, we got broken and wounded. Or, Lord, how do you want me to engage with this person? What is their role and their position in my life? We never asked him. And then we get mad at God because we feel like he didn't protect us. So the enemy uses these relationships to create division between us and God, but also to create spaces where we become isolated instead of supported in our journeys. So this is book one in a series of 5. I'll give you and your readers just a quick glimpse into what the other titles are. So the first book is The Illusion of Intimacy When Connection is in Covenant. The second one is about boundaries and discernment.
Mm.
how to set boundaries in our relationships with others, and steward our relationships well. The next one is covenant over chemistry. And this is, again, not just about romantic relationships, but also female relationships, where, and even mentorship relationships, where there's a lot of vibe and a lot of chemistry going on and we click, but is it a God ordained relationship? Key question. Then the other one is aligned hearts and anointed connections. And the final one is not every access is a sign. How do we make sure that we are not giving people access into our lives that God never ordained that they should have that level of access to? So yes, ma'am, that's the recent delivery. And you can get hold of me on my website, which is www.destiny-connections.com or www.sheisunleashed.org. And I am on Instagram and Facebook as Dr. Mirriam Knight or Dr. Mirriam Knight Wilson. You can search for me there.
Wow. Thank you so much. Again, my goodness, this has been a lot. I know my audience is like, okay, this is a lot. Yes, I may have to break it down and one half, part one and part two, or you at this point, I love podcasts. You can listen to part one and part two. You can break it up because this was very rich and I appreciate you coming. It gave me a lot to think about. I know it gave my listeners a lot to think about and process. There's so many, I usually do takeaways from this. I have so many takeaways. I have a lot. I can't even process all of my takeaways today. But I do have one. Obviously, mental health professional is necessary. We need a mental health professional. She mentioned a little bit about not having to take on everything, and it's okay to say, I can, but I'm not going to. Right? That concept of it's not because you can't, it's because you don't need to, and you know that that's not good for you, and really being honest. I use the concept of no being a full sentence, and we agreed that you can say no to things, and what people's expectations of you are, you don't have to meet those. You can literally be okay with someone not liking some of the decisions that you make. Again, that's back to my thought of let them have their own thoughts about whatever, and you make sure you are in control of what you need for your life. We talked about the imposter syndrome and being authentically who you are. That was amazing, and being authentically yourself, and even your shortcomings and the things that you don't like about yourself, just being real that this is me. I'm going through this, and then nobody can pull back a cover because you've already exposed yourself, right? We definitely did a little bit about, there's just so many things we covered. I do want you to go out and get her book and the books to come. And she even has other books that you'll see on her website. Not only is she an amazing person, as you can see by just listening to her, but she is a blessing to the body of Christ and to the world. And I thank you so much for spending your time. I know you have lots on your plate and those little ones and a husband and all the things you have to do to take that time today to spend with me. I appreciate it. And so just to say, this is this episode with Life with Libby Joy. I'm Libby Joy. And thanks for joining into this conversation today. I would love to learn more about the topics that you're interested in. So if you could please email me at lifewithlibbyjoy@gmail.com. I would love to hear some thoughts and some suggestions about podcast topics and any questions that you have. That would be great. Tune in next Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of Life with Libby Joy. Please subscribe and tell a friend about this podcast. I appreciate you and I want you to have a great day. And we are going to enjoy this journey of life.